Ellen, you are an extremely prolific and recognised cinematographer. You're an Academy Award nominee, you're an Emmy winner, you're a 3-time Sundance winner in the cinematography category. But we are here today to discuss your feature directorial debut with Lee.
Why does it matter? They're just pictures.
Do you want the world to know about you?
You think I went to war so people would know my name?
So to start off, I'd love to ask sort of when and where you came across Lee's story for the first time.
Well, being a photographer, still photographer as well as a cinematographer, I was really interested in Lee's work early on because she was a surrealist. So a lot of her early work as a photographer, having stepped from in front of the camera to behind the camera to take control of the image, she was experimenting a lot with surrealism and different ways of seeing photography, and I found that fascinating. And then when I dove in even more and I read Anthony Penrose's book, I realized she had so much of a rich life and so much more than just photography. You know, here she was a risk taker, she's somebody who was bold, who defied convention at a time when women were largely, in the home. And so she was somebody who really wanted to make a difference and to say something. And being a consummate storyteller, she was somebody who sought out the truth.
Yeah, the book is called The Lives of Lee Miller, which I think is a very apt title for someone who had such a broad life. But I think you were quite involved in the genesis of this project, which is one that's been worked on for a very long time, I think 8 years, something like that, to get the film made.
Well, I myself came to it after the film project had started. So I've been very long friends with Kate Winslet from Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, on which I was a cinematographer. And she and I, remained friends after that, and we did another film together after that. But it was Lee. It was. There you go. It was Kate in 2013 who bought a table that belonged to the Penrose family, and she called me up and she said, "Elle, I just bought this table. They've been owned by Lee Miller's sister-in-law." And we both marveled who would have been at that table. It would have been surely Picasso, Paul Elliott, Man Ray. Leonora Carrington, who in herself was a surrealist painter. So there was a group of people who were always hanging out. And she asked the question, why was there never a film made about Lee Miller, this incredible person? So it was Kate who actually went on the deep dive and went to Anthony Penrose to see about the rights to Lee's story. And that's when, unbeknownst to me, actually, she started getting a script written and trying to put together the project behind the scenes. And it wasn't until 5 years later in 2018 that she came to New York. She was visiting and she said to me, "Elle, I know that you're directing television, did Ozark, and I had done Catch-22 with George Clooney." And she said, "Would you be interested in directing this script? I really want to give women a chance to be able to direct, because it's always been a challenge to make a woman's story, be directed by a woman, produced by women." And here, she was able to put all of that together, and we have all of that element. So, this is a really special project for that reason, that there's so much great female energy that's gone into the making of this film. So that's how I actually started on board. And once she gave me the script, we started making adjustments on it, and we realized that we needed to change some of the structure. And so that's when Liz Hanna, the writer, came on board and helped us to make it into a movie story, so to speak. And then from then on, Kate went out looking for the financing, which was a challenge, but it's always, a puzzle putting the financing together for an independent film.
Yeah, I heard there was a period of time where Kate was kind of keeping the film finance just to keep getting it made. It sounds like a really intense and very sort of incredible shoot as well.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to you about that transition for you of moving from cinematography into the directing world, especially reading about your kind of first day on set, first week on set, which is shooting the opening of the film, this extremely intense sequence. How was that experience for you?
Well, I have been directing a lot before. So I'm an Academy-nominated director for a feature documentary that I made years ago and won the Emmy. So directing for me has familiar, but doing commercials, doing episodic television. So it's a different animal doing a movie, even though I've shot many movies from the past. So it was an interesting transition for me because the first thing I would say is that I'm almost deaf in this ear, and I have a hearing loss in this ear. So being a director for me was a scary place to be because I couldn't hear. And in order to be a director, you want to be able to hear everything that's going on. It wasn't until I was able to get some incredible hearing aids that it was a life-changing event for me that I felt like I could be a director. So being in the director's chair here for me was a way to be able to pull everything together. Not only design what the visual elements are, that's only part of a film, but part of the production design and, speaking to the wardrobe, costume department and, the vision for that and the vision for the locations and how we want them to be representative of an idea, just not be a place, and to be able to create the whole world in which Lee lived and thrived.
Yeah, you have such an incredible sort of team of collaborators here. I know for Kate Winslet, this has been a passion project for such a long time. I'm curious if she was always going to star in the film or if that was something that maybe came later on in the process.
It was from the start, that she would be Lee Miller. I mean, Kate herself actually shares a lot of qualities of being bold and fearless in some ways and supportive of women and wanting to be someone who challenges the boundaries. And so it was natural that she would be Lee Miller. But she was the one, taking this project on, knowing that that was a role that she really wanted to play. She wanted to, play this woman who, at middle age, in a time when women were able to go out of the house and go onto the battlefield with a camera.
Yeah, I think I heard or read as well that you two had kind of shared the book with each other and discussed it a long time ago, sort of after the filming of Eternal Sunshine.
Yeah, so she knew about Lee Miller, and so when she bought the table, she happened to open up a book. She remembered that she had a book about Lee Miller and opened up the book, and she said, oh, and there was this card from you, meaning me, and so it all kind of came together in that moment, and set her on her way to try and get the film done.
It really feels like a full circle moment in a way, doesn't it? I'd love to ask about the shoot generally. You have, I think, about a sort of 9-week shoot, something like that, traveling through Europe, lots of different locations. It sounds like quite an intense experience, and in some ways maybe putting you in the shoes of Lee and of the photographers, kind of moving through that space and capturing images. How was that?
The shoot was really challenging. I mean, because we originally wanted to do an 11-week shoot, which then got pared down to a 10-week shoot, which got pared down to a 9-week shoot. So part of being able to approach such an intense schedule where, we had actors coming in, a lot of the actors came in the first 2 weeks, that, to be prepared was absolutely key in everything. So that was one of the things, is making sure the art department is prepared, making sure that the cinematography department, had the shot list, knew what they were doing. So everybody could just come and be able to, move forward. Because the first week of filming was very, very intense. The first 2 days we had all of the war scenes. So we had explosions and we had Kate running through, the rubble and explosions and all of the explosions upstairs. So, there was a lot going on that first day. And as people might have heard about, the day before, which was our 1 day of rehearsal, Kate ended up slipping on the floor as she came in, and she was really hurt. But she wanted to persist and prevail because she knew everything was hanging on a thread. She knew that if we even delayed a few days or 2 days or even 1 day, it would affect everything down the line because we had actors coming in. So those first 2 days or the whole few weeks of her being injured was traumatic. You know, it's like, how can we make it the best possible experience for her to be able to be comfortable, but in her character. So, and then we had big crowd scenes that week, and then we had Marion Cotillard, who came in at the end of that week for a very, very moving scene between her and Kate when Lee Miller returns to Paris after the war. And so that was the first week.
I think it's wonderful how the film really throws you straight into Lee's headspace. Immediately you've got that amazing handheld cinematography, and it is funny to hear that in some ways behind the scenes maybe that was part of the experience as well. I'd love to ask you more about your collaborators. You've put together such a wonderful team for the film. I was so excited to see Alexandre Desplat as the composer, some really beautiful music. I heard that you had sort of Zoomed and asked if he would do the film.
We had an amazing group of creative collaborators who came together, and some of the people I knew and I brought to the film. And you know, of course, Kate has a huge history of being in the film industry and working with the costume designer, Michael O'Connor, and, her longtime makeup person, Ivana, and, different people who came, who really wanted to come together to make this film. But interestingly, Alexandre Desplat, whose work I have every single one of his albums that I listen to all the time, happened to contact us. And we had talked about him as a possible composer. And Kate called me and she says, "You're not going to believe this, but Alexandre Desplat wants to talk to us about Lee." And so we both got on the phone with him. And for me, it was 6 a.m. in the morning because I was in Los Angeles working. And she was in London, and we just couldn't believe it. Here we are, this person who has such a great musical voice and has brought so much resonance to so many films, is talking to us, So, of course, we at the end of the conversation, we said, "Well, would you consider doing this film?" And he says, No, I want to convince you that I can do this film. And we both started crying right away. We were like, "Oh my God, we can't believe this is happening."
Oh, that's so amazing. I feel the music really adds, so much of this film is about the emotional life and inner world of Lee, which I think is really wonderful and really powerful. You get another very personal element, I think, knowing that one of your other sort of collaborators through the process has been Anthony Penrose, who wrote the book, Lee's son. How was it kind of working with him when obviously this is such a personal subject matter of him, when you're sort of reading the book and approaching this from such a personal perspective?
Well, whereas, like you're saying, Alexandre Desplat, was able to bring out the musical voice of the film. Anthony Penrose, this actual son of Lee Miller, is someone who brought out, her life to us, her real life and experience. And he himself is a prolific writer and has written many books about his mother, and who has compiled work that brings us his mother's words. And he has this incredible archive that he saved, that he shared with us very freely. He welcomed us into his home and into Farley Farm, which is here in England. Actually, anybody can go down to Farley Farm and see where Lee Miller lived with Roland Penrose and Anthony Penrose, where he grew up. But Anthony himself was so open and so generous. And I know that Kate spent a lot of time down in Farley Farm just talking to him about his mother and also doing research. And for me, he welcomed me out into the archives to read her work, read her personal correspondence, letters that had never been published. And also, he enabled me to look through her contact sheets, which was, I thought, invaluable because it enabled me to see the trajectory of her journey through photography, but also her journey through Germany when she went into the heart of darkness. So you see what she's seeing and you can feel those contact sheets. So it enabled me to also create the world, because here I had her actual photographs of what it was, so I could try to capture that in the spirit of the truth.
Yeah, the sort of tangible presence of history is so kind of at the forefront of this film. I'm really curious about, you have a lot of experience in documentary film. I think maybe you sort of got your start, a lot of your first work is in documentary. I'm curious what you bring from the world of the documentary to your narrative work, how that kind of informs your vision and how you interpret story.
Well, I started out in documentary because I liked the accessibility of it. And also when I started in film, both as a director and as a cinematographer, there weren't that many women working at all. I was one of the first. So documentary was a place where I could actually explore using the camera as a metaphor, using the camera to create meaning. And documentary, I was still able to do that, even though it's, filming certain situations. But it taught me how to think about the scene. You don't have much time. In documentary, you have to land, you have to figure out where the camera's going to go, what the story is. So for me, what was always important is, what is the story that we're trying to tell here? Even if it's a documentary, I'm not just doing the splat camera of trying to film everything around me. It has to be with a very specific point of view. And that has greatly informed, working as a feature director, and for all of my years working as a cinematographer, is being able to, look at the scene, say, okay, why is the scene written? What does it mean? How do we want to portray this? From whose point of view? And that informs everything about the camera. But working as a documentarian years ago, I was able to do that quickly and to be a problem solver on set and to be able to think like, okay, I know we can see all of this, but we're not going to see that. And, it became a joke on set, where I was doing director scouting and I'm like, okay, we're going to see this, but we're not going to see that. That's going to be where the camera is going to be behind us. And that's a way that of problem solving that, that I think film genres inform each other and they go hand in hand.
Yeah, every image has a narrative and a purpose and a story, and I really can't imagine a more perfect film to convey that than Lee. The film is out in UK cinemas on Friday the 13th of September. To wrap up, this is the love of cinema. I'd love to ask you, what is the experience you want people to have with Lee in the cinema? What do you want them to take away from the film? We want audiences to be able to get to know Lee and to experience with her boldness, and be unafraid with her to go through these risk-taking adventures that she has embarked upon, and also to connect with her and her emotional life and the journey that she went on, so that we can feel, the cost that she paid for putting out these images and for what she did during the war and who she was as a person, that we take that with us, and that, we learn also about, I think what's also important about this film is that we're seeing history through a contemporary lens. I mean, not only is Lee a contemporary person, in this context, looking back in history and also in the 70s, but also this film itself, is looking at history through a contemporary lens. Because we start before the war has started in the late 30s, there's something that brings us back to now, when we see ourselves in this group of people who are carefree and not thinking about what's happening around the corner for the war and what happens when an authoritarian comes to bear and takes over. And I think here today, where we're in a crisis around the world in terms of democracy, I think we can ask ourselves the same questions. Are we aware enough of what's happening around the corner? And how can we avoid what's obviously happened during World War II? We see through this film what has happened. So in a way, I hope that people will look at themselves in this film in so many more ways than one. Congratulations again, such an achievement, and such a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Even when I wanted to look away. I knew I couldn't.
Thank you for watching Picturehouse Cinema's unique video content. Hit the subscribe button to be kept up to date with our movie news, cast and crew interviews, highlights, trailers, and lots more.